We are celebrating PUBG's 7th anniversary. It's crazy to see how far the game has come from the launch back in 2017, just on the graphics alone, but also on the gameplay. So today we're going to do a quick review of the best graphics to use in PUBG for a low-end system and a high-end system. These will be broken up in segments. If you need to skip ahead, feel free to do so. Let's begin. First, we're going to open up Device Manager. You can do this by right-clicking on the Start menu down at the bottom left corner if you're on Windows 10 or 11. Click on Device Manager. Once you have that open, look for System Devices, and then High Precision Event Timer. On here, you can right-click and click Disabled, then Yes. This can significantly help with game-related issues around micro-stuttering and frame rate inconsistencies or fluctuation. Next, we're going to turn on Windows Game Mode. To do this, you can right-click on the bottom left menu, click on System. Under Find a Setting, type in Game Mode, and make sure this is on. This will turn off a lot of Windows functions in the background that don't need to be running while you're gaming. This is not to be mistaken for Xbox Game Bar, which I would highly recommend to remove from your computer if you're not using anything Xbox related. To pull up Nvidia settings, let's right-click on the desktop, go to Nvidia Control Panel. The very first option here is image scaling. This setting can be used to boost FPS. You'd first set your in-game resolution to a lower resolution than your monitor's native resolution, and then Nvidia's image scaling would kick in and start upscaling that resolution to help make it look better than what the actual resolution that's selected in-game would typically look like. So example would be if you're using 1920 by 1080, but you select 1280 by 720, you're going to get a boost in FPS, and with the image scaling on and sharpening, you would look roughly about 30% better than 1280 by 720. So it can help boost your FPS if you're on a lower end machine and you want to get a little bit better FPS look. For higher end machines, this option is not necessary unless you're trying to downscale from 4K. For ambient occlusion, I would recommend to have this setting off. It does make the lighting really pop though, so if you're trying to do something cinematic, I would turn it on. Otherwise, for both high-end and low-end systems, I would recommend to have it off. Anisotropic filtering, I would recommend to have as application controlled. This means that it would be controlled by PUBG's graphical settings. FXAA is off, gamma correction on, anti-aliasing mode as application controlled, once again allowing PUBG to control that setting. Transparency as off. Background maximum frame rate, I would turn off. This particular setting, if you're on a low-end machine and you need to alt-tab often, it might be good to turn on. That will essentially lower your FPS in-game while you're alt-tabbed. CUDA, you want to have all GPUs selected. Most computers nowadays only have one graphics card in there, but if you do have more than one, you definitely want to have all of them in use. System fallback policy, if you're on a really high-end machine like a 14th generation Intel processor, you may experience the 3-hour crash. You can try turning this particular option to no fallback to see if that would help with the crashing. DSR factors. This setting is similar to the Nvidia scaling and sharpening that we talked about earlier, this one here. But it kind of goes in a different direction. If you have a monitor that has a native resolution of 1920 by 1080, but you want to play in a higher resolution like 2560 by 1440, which is 2K resolution, you can turn this on. And you also want to turn on DSR smoothness between 15 to about 30%. To kind of see how your system handles it. If you're on a lower end system, this will be a massive drag, and it's something you definitely do not want to turn on. But if you're on a higher end system and you have a monitor that can't output the resolution that you're looking for, give this a try. Low latency mode, we want to have as on. If you're still experiencing low FPS, so on a lower end machine, try to set this to ultra. Or if you're on a higher machine and just want to get a little bit more FPS, you can turn that to ultra as well. Max frame rate, I would recommend to have as off. If you are on a lower end machine, and you do MFAA, I would have as off. I would have GDI as auto. Open GL rendering GPU, you want to set as your primary graphics card. And this next one here is super important, power management mode. This particular setting you should always have on as prefer maximum performance. This will essentially use more power, but it'll get you better performance and better stability all around. One additional setting to look at that's on the Windows side would be your power settings for Windows. To get here, you want to right click on the startup menu down in the bottom left corner, click on power options. It's going to bring you to this menu here where you can then click on additional power settings. Make sure your computer is using high performance. This is for laptops or desktops. Click on change plan settings. Change advanced power settings. This menu here is going to pop up. So again, you want to make sure you're on high performance. It's going to use up more electricity, but it's going to give you a better stability. Look under USB settings, USB selective suspending, and make sure this is disabled. One other additional thing that I would recommend turn off is sleep mode and hibernation mode. These things are not necessary and can actually turn off some settings in the background that may affect performance. Preferred refresh rate should always be highest available. If you're not sure what your current refresh rate is on your computer and you are experiencing some FPS latency, right click on your desktop, go to display settings. This is going to pop up your monitors. In this case, I have a gaming monitor as number 1, a secondary monitor as number 2. Under my gaming monitor, I'm going to click on advanced display settings. At the bottom here, I'm going to make sure that this is the highest available. One thing to note on this is if you do experience some latency or some screen tearing or just FPS inconsistencies, and you have a secondary monitor that is on a higher resolution than your gaming monitor, I would recommend to set these both to be the same and then check under the advanced display settings and try both of the refresh rates that are available. So in this case, I have a 2560 by 1440 secondary monitor that can do either 59.951 hertz or 60 hertz. 60 hertz actually gives me FPS latency, so I switched that to 59. Shader cache size. I recommend using driver default, although if you have a lot of space available, like the C drive, if you have 150 gigabytes of space available on the C drive, you can select 100 gigs here. Otherwise, I would recommend you use driver default if you don't have as much space available. You may occasionally experience some FPS stuttering, some lag when you're downloading new shaders, but that should be more of a temporary thing. For sample optimization, we have off. Negative LOD bias, this is a really important one. We highly recommend that you use clamp, not allow. In a lot of videos you're going to find online, they're going to recommend to use allow. For PUBG specifically, after some testing, is definitely a better option to use clamp. The game looks significantly better. If you're on a lower end machine, I would recommend trying to use allow to see if it would boost your performance just a little bit, but the actual look of the game is going to drop significantly. Texture filtering, quality. I recommend to use quality for a lower end system. Using high performance can definitely get you a little bit more performance. For a higher end system, there's a very minimal difference between quality and high quality. Trilinear optimization, we want to have this as on. Threaded optimization on auto. Triple buffering and vertical sync are both off. Pre-rendered frames to 1. Super sample would be off. And preset method is auto. The last thing that we want to do here in the Nvidia Control Panel is click on System Information. We're specifically looking for Resize bar or resizable bar. I have mine set to yes. We want to make sure that's on. If you have this available on your graphics card and motherboard, I would recommend to turn it on. You can do this by downloading the Nvidia Profile Inspector via GitHub. I'll share this in the description below. Once you download it and extract it, you're going to get this pop up here, this window here. You want to scroll down to Common. Under here, you want to make sure this is set to, power mode is set to prefer max performance. R-bar feature is enabled. R-bar options are set to the one that ends in 01. I only have one in this case. You may have other options. And then the size limit would be this one right here. At the end, you want to make sure you apply changes in the upper right corner. You're all set. Resize bar or resizable bar is not available for all systems, but it can definitely help if you have a system that has the capability. You can also view it in EVGA Precision X1 if you use that software here by going to the top right tab that says rebar and making sure that it's enabled. Before launching PUBG, we want to right click on PUBG in Steam and go to Properties. You're going to see this box pop up here. I highly recommend to use -hi, a space, -no vid. -hi will prioritize this on your computer as high priority. And no vid will turn off any intro vid or incoming video when you first launch the game, introduction video that normally plays. There are other launch options that are available. However, a lot of them don't have any effect at all or have very minimal effect on PUBG's game. One additional thing that you can do that was shared by Lobster, shout out to Lobster for providing this video, is something that can be done to help reduce input lag in PUBG. What you do is after launching PUBG, you right click on the taskbar, click on Task Manager. You're going to want to go up to Details. You're going to see PUBG in there, typically at the highest. You want to sort this by name. When you do that, you're going to see PUBG is going to have a really big file here, a big process that's running. You want to look for the second biggest one that's typically right around 10. And you want to right click on that and hit End Task. You do not want to do End Process Tree, just End Task. What this will do is it'll turn off the launcher. According to Lobster's video, it turns off the launcher function that's just used for launching the game. One thing that we also been testing on this channel, shout out to Gorf Denro, is that users with a high-end system that crash after 3 hours of playing, either 3 or 4 hours of playing, if this task is done, those users so far have not experienced those crashes at that time. Now let's jump right into the PUBG settings. So we're going to go to the gear menu in the top right. Click on Settings. On the main first tab here, main screen, we've got display mode. I would highly recommend to use full screen. If you use borderless or windowed, you are able to move your mouse off of the screen. However, your refresh rate on your monitor may not actually match up to what it's supposed to be if you're not using full screen. Resolution, I would recommend if you have the ability to try this game in 2K. It looks absolutely amazing. If you use DSR factors that we talked about earlier, you can turn this on if your monitor can only go up to 1920 by 1080 to enable that extra resolution. It is harsh on the system though, once again, if you're using DSR factors, so not for a low-end system. Lobby FPS cap, I'd recommend to have this on unlimited unless you're on a low-end system where 30 could really benefit you while you're waiting for people to join. Same with in-game FPS. Smooth frame rate, you definitely want to have disabled on a low-end or a high-end machine. Brightness, I recommend 75. I find it's a really good spot. It's a sweet spot for all maps. Otherwise, you can switch it if you wanted to change it per map. You can do that as well. Next, we're going to click on the Advanced tab. Render scale, I would recommend to keep around 100. You can set the render resolution scale to render in relation to your resolution. Example being if you're using 1920 by 1080 resolution, 100 would be 100% of 1080. If you need to improve your FPS, you can try lowering this between 80 to 90. So if you put it to 80, for instance, and you're on 1920 by 1080, it's rendering 80% of 1080. For higher performance, if you're using a 2K monitor at 144 Hertz or higher, you can try to raise the render scale to 120. Just watch your FPS and make sure it does not fluctuate under the monitor's refresh rate for best performance. For FPP camera FOV, I would recommend to use 103. It does provide a larger viewing angle, but may make certain images look skinnier. I think this is a big help though when you're looking at the difference between 90 and 103 FOV. Just your overall viewing area is significantly larger. Anti-aliasing and post-processing, I would recommend to use on high or ultra. If you're on a higher end machine, If you're on a lower end machine, very low would be the best option for both of these. They should be in conjunction with each other. Shadows. On a low end system, I would recommend using low to medium for best performance, but there's really not much of a significant effect here. The difference is very minimal. Having shadows does allow you to see objects flying around and sometimes player shadows if they're standing off the side of a building. If you're on a high performance system, I would still recommend using medium. If you turn them up to ultra, you may miss out on other things that are going on because of the shadows. For textures, each of these settings can have a big impact on performance depending on what kind of hardware you have. If your graphics card has a lot of VRAM, like 6 or more gigs, I would recommend to put this up to ultra. If you're on a lower end system, very low would be the way to go. Effects. Very low and low settings have very little difference on your FPS. So for the best performance, I would recommend to use low. If you're on a high-end system, I would recommend to use ultra, as there's really very little difference between medium and high. Whether you're on a high-end system or a low-end system, I would recommend to have foliage on very low. If you have this on ultra, it will load in all of the trees on the entire map while you're on the plane. You may not be able to see people running around at a great distance. Very low will allow you to see the players still running around without all of the extra foliage and not have to waste those resources loading in trees from kilometers away. View distance is kind of a similar thing, but in the opposite direction. View distance I recommend to have on ultra if possible. There's a little difference between each one that you're going to see on FPS. However, with view distance on ultra, you're going to be able to see things load in. If you're doing a hot drop on Sandhawk, you're trying to drop boot camp, you're going to be able to see the objects load in sooner than other people who have it on a lower setting. Sharpen I recommend to have on as enabled. There's very little effect that you're going to see between having this on or off on FPS. If you do see objects that are shimmering, I would recommend to turn this off, or vice versa. If it's off and you see shimmering, I would try turning it on. VSync you want to have off. Motion blur you want to have off. DirectX 11 is the one I would still recommend for everyone to use, but it does depend on your system, and I would recommend to try each one to see how they work for you. Shout out to Lebo for giving us a nice description between DirectX 11 Enhanced and 12. They're almost the same exact. DirectX 12 mode uses multi-plane overlay, which basically means if you want to switch between the game and your desktop apps, you'll be able to do so without the screen freezing, like a black screen freezing when you switch between the two that DirectX 11 Enhanced uses. DirectX 12 uses the multi-plane overlay and provides a full screen performance in a windowed borderless view. So for me, I tried all three of these. One thing to be mindful of, DirectX 12 will not let you use DSR factors, which means that I would not be able to use 2560 by 1440 resolution. I'd have to use my native resolution on my monitor. For me, when I use DirectX 11 Enhanced, I actually experience more FPS stuttering and lagging, and DirectX 11 works the best for me. However, this is going to change by everybody's system. Something to keep in mind. Shout out to Hendo, one of our mods on the channel. He prefers DirectX 11 Enhanced and actually got the best performance on his system with his hardware. Next, we're going to take a look at the audio settings. I would recommend to have the lobby music set to early access. It is definitely the best music that PUBG has put out to date. Weapon sound effects down here at the bottom is going to be the next thing that you want to look at. I recommend to use remastered, but it really just comes down to your preference. Legacy is when it was first in beta. That would be the sounds that were used back then. I think remastered has a much better way to go. HRTF is super important and always should be enabled. Instant volume reducer intensity. This basically means, and we'll look at the keys here shortly, but this basically means how much volume the instant reducer button is going to lower. So if your max volume is normally 100% and you press the volume reducer button, it's going to bring it to 50%. Voice chat, your input mode should always be Push to talk. If you are using an open microphone, you are wrong. That is something you do in Discord, not in game. Please, for God's sake, save us all. If you are going to disregard that and use an open microphone, please make sure you go through the Windows microphone setup so that you can properly set up your microphone so we don't hear everything in your backdrop. Nobody appreciates a teammate who's blasting their audio. Voice chat channel, I would typically recommend to have this set to team only if you're playing with randoms. And these last two settings are just a preference. Next, we've got controls. I use general sensitivity of 43. My other sensitivities on Windows is 800 DPI, Windows sensitivity 6. So my in-game sensitivity is 43. If you're not sure where to start, a good place to start would being able to do a 45-degree left look and a 45-degree right look on your mouse pad. It's very dependent on how much mouse pad room that you have, whether it be a small or very large mouse pad, but it's a good place to start. You can also turn on universal sensitivity for all scopes like I have on here, or customize it per scope if you like. Vertical sensitivity multiplier. This is extremely, extremely important. Do not mess with this setting. The setting should never leave 1. This can really cause a lot of different other problems, and it may look like it helps you, but it can cause different things to happen for different weapons and your sensitivity to get really out of control. I do not recommend changing this from 1. Key input method. Some of these are really just straight up preference, but a couple to go through real quick. So crouch you can have set to hold. Players like Tinkleton use this. It's definitely something hard to get used to, and I think it could provide a benefit, but if you're in a heated situation where you need to stay crouched behind an object, you're going to find yourself randomly standing up. Prone I definitely do recommend to have as a toggle as well. Walk I would recommend to use as hold so that you can quickly start walking if you need to, or slow down. Same with sprint. Using toggle to sprint is a very old school way of doing it, and it's very inefficient. Holding the breath, of course, you want to have as hold. You don't want to just keep continuing holding your breath when you don't need to. Canted sights, I use this toggle so that I could toggle to them if I want to real quick versus holding it. Though on the flip side to that, your aim and your ADS keys should both be hold. These are extremely important. So aim is your soft aim. That's like from your shooting from your hip or your shoulder, excuse me. If you're playing FPP, you generally aren't going to do a lot of aiming from the shoulder versus ADS is aiming down your sights. You absolutely want to have this on hold. If you have this on toggle, you're essentially ADSing significantly slower. It's probably close to 50% slower than somebody else who's using a hold ADS. Next, we've got key bindings. We're going to specifically look at the jump/vault key. You want to change this to jump only. So spacebar is jump only, and then vault should be one key like V. But one of the benefits of being able to do this is that you can physically jump into the window and then peek off the side of a building at an angle that you normally wouldn't have line of sight on. I've used this plenty of times. It's a great way of getting different angles on people that they're not ready for. You're not going to be able to do that if you use a jump vault button. Scroll down just a little bit farther here to the delete marker. I highly recommend to have this bound to make sure that you're using it. If you mark something that's in a window, for instance, and you can't see the player in the window because your marker's in the way, being able to press delete to delete that marker is extremely helpful. Additionally, the quick marker is going to be something that you want to set your left and right mouse button. So this will point on the vector, which is the little gray thing at the top of your screen. I'll show you here in a video what this looks like. Every time you aim, either left click and start firing or right click to aim, that it points to what you're aiming at essentially on the vector. Inventory radio message. If you need an item, you can simply click on the item to mark the piece of equipment that you are in need of, or you can click on it to show how many meds you have to your team. One additional setting at the bottom of this list that we're going to want to look at is instant volume reducer. We talked about this earlier under the audio settings. We're going to find right under here, instant volume reducer. That is the setting. So you want to make sure you have that set. This is really useful if you're in a very loud car and you need to be able to turn down the volume temporarily. It's essentially a toggle. So you tap it to turn the volume down, tap it to turn off the volume reducer, and put it back to what it was before. Next, under combat, I would highly recommend to make sure that you're not using an aim/ADS button. You want to make sure that these are separate. For first person, I don't really use aim at all, which once again is shooting from the shoulder view instead of aiming down the sight. I don't use this key at all, so I kind of just bound it to something that's out of the way that I'm not actually going to bump. You can actually hip fire most weapons in PUBG without having to do like a soft aim, so it's not really necessary in first person. ADS is your aim down sight, so I typically recommend it to be the right click. I use the default setting here, which is the left alt plus right click in order to use canted sights. If we scroll down a little bit farther here, we're going to see different things like holstering weapons and grenades if you want to bind those to make it a little bit easier in panic situations. What we're looking for, radio message wheel. This is super important, and this is how you can do different things like a 3D spot, or if you want to say that I need ammo or I need meds, that can allow a teammate to toss you those items. At the bottom of this menu, you're also going to have your heal items that you can set to keybinds. I use different keybinds for a med kit and a first aid and a bandage. If you do bind something to like heal item here, I use 3. This will essentially use the med kits first, then a first aid, then a bandage in that order. The same goes for using a boost item. It'll use a syringe first, a painkiller next, and then I always use adrenaline sticks first, then painkillers, then energy drinks. The reason for this is late game, when your boost levels drop from 100% down to 50%, you can use an energy drink to get back to full boost without wasting a ton of space on boosters. The example being 1 adrenaline stick is 2 painkillers. 1 painkiller is 2 energy drinks as far as how much it weighs in your backpack. If you switch over to energy drinks, you can essentially be full boosted for the rest of the game, probably phase 4 all the way to the end of the game if you have about 5 or 6 of them. It's best to be full boosted. That extra little boost can help make the difference between winning a fight and not winning a fight. For vehicle, there's not much in here that we really need to go over other than under move to seat 2. I would recommend to set the alternative key to E and seat 3 to Q. What this will do is when you're in a vehicle, let's say if you're trying to do a drive-by on someone, you can hold W to accelerate forward, and then you hit E, which will automatically switch you into the front right passenger seat to lean out. Q would lean you out of the back left passenger seat. This is also how you can keep your engine moving and keep accelerating a little bit while you're shooting at someone while moving in a vehicle. Gameplay, inventory character render. This is something that will definitely affect FPS. If you're on a lower end system, I would recommend to turn this to off. Otherwise, I would recommend to keep it on. It can help you figure out what your character looks like, and if you picked up a level 3 backpack that is colored in its bright colors and you don't want to have something bright colored on, you can definitely see what it looks like. Colorblind mode is completely personal preference. I would try all these modes to see which one allows you to see everything the best that works for you. Same with crosshair color. It's very personal preference. CSGO players, give an example here, are often selecting a bright red or pink crosshair, as it does not mix with most colors on most maps, but it really just kind of comes down to what you're used to. I personally use a green one. Under function, TPP aim camera position, last peek and shoulder I think is probably your best way to roll with that, but it is really a preference. Auto reload I have as disabled. That's also a preference, but it can really help if you're trying to switch guns or if you want to not reload so somebody can hear you. It's a good thing to have us off. The firing modes, I'm just going to kind of leave this here on the screen here for just a minute, but we'll go through these quick. For handguns, you want to have set to full auto so that if you pick up a Glock, it's on automatic already. Same for SMGs. Secondary default firing mode for SMGs I have as single. For firing for ARs, full auto. Secondary, that would be like your mutant and your M16. I have those set to single. Firing mode for DMRs, I have set to single if you're using an MK14, otherwise it would turn it on auto right off the bat. Same with shotguns, is single, otherwise if you picked up an 012 it automatically switch it to the firing mode auto. Auto equip attachments with interaction key. I like this because if you're looking at the ground and you look at a vertical grip, you can press F and it'll automatically attach it to one of your guns. Auto replace, this is kind of the same thing. If you had a vert grip in your inventory but you had a thumb grip on your M4, if you right click on the vertical grip, it's going to automatically swap it with the thumb grip. Same with this one here from your inventory. Auto replace weapon skin. I like to have this one as off because you get to see what people's different skins are on their weapons. If you want to put your own on after you pick up a gun, you can do left control, left shift, and then left click to take it off. And then you go back and then do left control, left shift, and then click to put your own on. So very easy if you want to swap that over. Hide helmet and vest. Well, it's just whether or not you see your own helmet and vest displayed when you're looking at your character. Additional action queuing, I definitely recommend to have on. It can definitely speed up some things that just little tasks that you want to do in a queue. These are some really interesting settings as well. So highlight recommended ammo. I have this as off. You're going to see ammo all over the place. You don't need the game to glow it for you. But if you do like that, you can turn it on. I think it should be off. It's way less distracting. Though recommended equipment is definitely a must-have as enabled. If you have a level 2 vest and you are running around and you happen to see a level 3, it's going to be glowing. However, if you run over a level 1 vest, it's not going to be glowing, meaning the vest you currently have is better than the one that's on the ground. Same with highlight recommended attachments. Basically means that if you don't have any grips on your M4 and you run past like a vert grip, you're going to see it glowing on the ground saying you need that item. Delayed exit from moving vehicles. This one is super nice. I highly recommend having this as on. Basically, when you're going above a speed that you would immediately die if you jumped out of the car, you can have this as on. Otherwise, what could happen is sometimes there's a glitch in the game when you're healing and you're bandaging. Sometimes it ejects you from the vehicle. This prevents that from happening. Auto equip regular vehicle skins. This one I would have on if you have some cool skins. Last setting we have here is the save and load settings. I would highly recommend to save these to the cloud. Basically just saves it to your record in the cloud, that if you ever reinstalled the game or built a new computer, that you'd be able to load in those settings versus having to write them all down. I want to provide a special shout out to Panjno. If you haven't checked out his channel yet over on YouTube, please do. He does a phenomenal job breaking down different things like Nvidia settings and going into really granular detail about different things that can help you based on your system setup. Thanks for watching, guys. Once again, if you guys haven't yet, please subscribe. Let me know as well in the comments below if you've had better luck with some settings. Share what your system specs are. We'll see you on the battlefield.